I'm LRJ from LRJTV News. It's about to go down. LRJ basically is the most shocking, informative, and funny news. But today, this is going to be very informative information. I want to introduce you guys to a great woman. Her name is Kim Gardner. This woman is the St. Louis City Circuit Attorney. This woman has done some great things to reform the justice system. I am in love with Kim Gardner because she is a real, true black sister, and she's a woman of her word, and she ain't afraid of nobody. And I'm about to introduce you to who Kim Gardner is. You may not understand why Kim Gardner is such a special woman, so let me break down to you about St. Louis. And I have to go there, so please don't get offended with the truth.
It's America's monument to Western expansion, the Gateway Arch, the symbol of a journey toward a prosperous future. Yet in St. Louis, life is still bound to a history of racism. Across the United States, there are many cities that have segregated neighborhoods and divided areas. But here in St. Louis, if you drive down Delmar Boulevard and you get out and you talk to some of the people here, they call it the Delmar Divide. It's because whites are on that side and blacks on the other side. Some St. Louis natives acknowledge segregation exists here, intentional or not.
For instance, just going into North City, you know, if you're white, most people just think, oh yeah, I just can't go there. You know, whether it is racism, whether it's just a community that you just don't interact with as much, you know, which is sad.
St. Louis has been this way for a long time. They used to sell slaves during the Civil War in St. Louis, and I don't think that mentality's ever left.
Inside, a racial profiling survival kit from the ACLU is tacked to the wall.
I had one instance where I just left my house. I was going up to the gas station up here, just give me a pack of cigarettes, okay? And then the officer stopped me right here, you know what I'm saying?
Just for walking down the
street?
Just
for walking down the street.
Officer Milton Green shows where the bullet entered his arm. He says he'll never be able to work the streets again as an officer.
Sometimes it's numb. I get the shakes a lot with it. I get shooting pains.
2 years ago, a stolen car crashed near Green's house. He was working with a neighbor on a car in the driveway at the time. Well, during a gun battle between police and teenage suspects, a fellow officer shot Green, although Green had already interacted with other officers at the scene who knew he was with the department.
I don't understand how I was shot. Due to me having my badge out, my gun straight down to the side, pointing down at the ground. It wasn't moving at all.
The officer who shot Green is white. Green believes race was a factor in how the situation played out. His attorney says the neighbor that Green was with was also detained by police for several hours, even after Green vouched for him.
Leads us to believe that race was a factor, that the cops targeted them because they were black and happened to be on the scene.
A divide that some compared to Native Americans being put on reservations.
But if you break it down in that way, you will get a better understanding of how you're being herded, how you're being manipulated, how you're being shoved here, and what's being thrown into your community.
To this video, which only News 4 has, the officer kicking a suspect is gone from his previous department, but now with another.
Officer now works here at the Breckenridge Hills Police Department. This comes just months after we first showed you that video, and he resigned from his job at the Woodson Terrace Police Department. Tonight, that move has people that live here with mixed emotions.
What comes to mind to me is that another cop gets off with the ease and get a job with no problem.
D'Amico Mosley lives in Breckenridge Hills and says he backs his police department. But tonight, he still doesn't agree with this video or what happened in the months after. In April, News 4 showed the video to the chief, who pledged to investigate. We learned the officer in question resigned just days before an internal affairs interview. Now the department says they can't investigate any further. Greg Bunstein feels the officer did nothing wrong.
And they put their life on the line to protect us. You know, so I mean, you know, come on, give him a break. He's a good cop, what I've heard.
Do you think an officer seen in video that's being investigated by the FBI should be serving on the police department in the city that you live in?
No.
St. Louis former circuit attorney, her name was Jennifer Joyce. They called her Clorox because she was easy on whites but hard on the colors. And Jennifer Joyce did not care at all about the African American community. Jennifer knew the St. Louis Police Department was crooked.
As part of our investigation, we look at the backgrounds of all the witnesses, including the officers. So we did check into those 2 officers, and we're aware that there was one instance where a judge in this circuit found one of the officers involved in this shooting to be not credible. So we were aware of that.
Yeah, they're both being sued by the defendant, by the person whose case was, the charges were dropped against Jeremy Eden.
I'm not familiar with any federal lawsuit. We don't have anything to do with that protocol where we are reviewing these officer-involved shootings. I'm a big fan of somebody other than the police reviewing these cases. Doesn't have to be me, can be anybody, but someone other than the police has to review these cases. Here, the Ball Bay case. Here, the Ball Bay case, in doing a simultaneous investigation.
Right, I remember
which was
that.
our first one.
10-year-old Mansour Ball Bay was shot after police say he tried to run during the execution of a search warrant and pointed a stolen gun with an extended magazine at 2 cops.
There were 2 officers in the alley. Both officers fired. Right now it appears one officer fired 1 shot, the other fired 3 shots. The suspect was struck. He dropped his gun and continued to run through a gangway until he collapsed in front of 1233 Walton here on this street.
The distraught family said they could not believe the police account because Ball Bay was not capable of those crimes. He had just graduated from high school, held a steady job, and was heading to college. His cousin wrote on Facebook, Ball Bay had no criminal background, adding that the police shot the wrong person. According to family accounts, Ball Bay stopped by an aunt's house on his way home from his part-time job at FedEx and was met by police in an unmarked car. His cousin said the family believes Ball Bay was trying to get away and the police shot him.
Mansour Ball Bay was shot by 2 plainclothes police officers in what the officers say was self-defense. The trial ended on June 2, 2016, with a ruling in favor of the 2 officers. Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce stated the evidence did not show that the officers acted unprofessionally or maliciously. The autopsy report stated that Mansour's spine was severed by a bullet. However, the police report would have required him to run another 80 feet.
Okay.
And I want to just tell you, if you're looking for everything to fit perfectly, it's never going to happen in any criminal case. In the ones we dismiss because we don't have enough evidence, or in the ones that we convict, it never fits cleanly. And if it did, then there would really be no need for juries or judges or prosecutors, or we would just let the police handle it all. If everything always fit properly.
Yeah.
And there's also the reasonable doubt question. That there's a big difference between what prosecutors have to come up with, proving something beyond a reasonable doubt, and in a case like this, kind of proving a negative, proving they didn't fear. That's a very difficult legal standard, and I think in there you'll see what that laid out very well.
However, the police report would have required him to run another 80 feet. There's a
district judicial system that is supported by the Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce. And she has the power and the influence to hold law enforcement officials accountable for their actions when they're unconstitutionally aggressive against protesters that are nonviolent and peaceful in these particular scenarios.
In St. Louis and Ferguson, they'll just arrest me for filming on the sidewalk.
Really? Wow.
Downtown St. Louis, there are children that are afraid of police.
We was just standing here and 2 police officers just rolled past, cut their sirens on us, waved down the window and sarcastically said, "Hi, Mom," and laughed. I'm very confused by that.
Stop. Turned around. Threw the gun over to his left side, raised his hands in the air. And that's when he was shot. It's exactly the spot in which Kerry was shot. A total of 25 times. Marks in which the bullets either hit the ground or entered Kerry's body and came out. Yeah. And as you can see, none of these are at an angle. They're all straight.
Kerry did have a gun with him that night. There's no argument to that. But he threw it, witnesses say. And the police chief, Dotson, even said they have 6 witnesses that coincide to say that Kerry threw the gun and his hands was in the air. So that was a surrendered man to me. And 25 shots is very excessive.
Kids as young as 2 years old outside that saw it. There's kids that's 5 and 6 years old that now every time they see the police, they urinate on themselves. This has traumatized everybody, not just the family, but the whole entire community. Always been an honor roll student his whole life. These are certificates from Kerry's elementary school all the way up till high school and in college. Here is his Emerging Scholars Award that he just received the day of his funeral, which was May 1st. And it's for having a 3.5 or better over completing over 12 development education credits. And this was given to him. He was supposed to be in the ceremony that evening, May 1st, 2013, but instead he was getting buried.
And when I tell you that officers was going around literally gunning down innocent people in the streets all day long, and nobody did a thing about it. But Jennifer Joyce decided to do one thing before she left office. She took a bunch of evidence and put it together to leave for the new Circuit Attorney, Kim Gardner. And Kim took that case to trial.
Former officer is waiting to learn his fate after standing trial last month for first-degree murder in the 2011 shooting death of Anthony Lamar Smith. Prosecutors say Stockley executed the 24-year-old after a suspected drug deal and high-speed chase, then planted a gun to cover it up that only had Stockley's DNA on it.
Why he took off his gloves is very alarming as well, because it violates policy. It's not normal policy to do that.
But the evidence alone isn't why some in law enforcement are calling for a conviction of one of their own.
That judge needs to know that there are officers who support accountability for this officer. You don't have to decide that you're going to take a life and then feel like you can do it because you know the system is going to back you up.
It's been a long road to get to this point. This is because Stockley was charged 5 years after the incident between him and Smith happened. All of this came after former Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce found new evidence to arrest Stockley that was in the form of forensic evidence and witness statements. Stockley waived his right for a jury trial. His fate will now be in the hands of Judge Timothy Wilson. Judge Wilson will be looking at what led up to the shooting and whether or not Stockley feared for his life.
Stockley did not want a jury trial, so he requested to have a bench trial with the judge, and the judge so happened to be a cop lover, and he walked away. If you did not see that video I posted, the video will be up here.
I want to extend my heartfelt sympathy and shared disappointment to the family of Mr. Anthony Lamar Smith. A not guilty verdict was the finding announced today by 22nd Judicial Circuit Judge Timothy Wilson in the murder case against former St. Louis Police Department officer Jason Stockley. I know there are better ways that we can do this if we join together and make the system work for us all. In closing, I understand and know the deep mistrust for law enforcement and the criminal justice system as a whole in our communities, and especially those communities of color in our city. In too many of these communities, there is a feeling of hopelessness and that the system is rigged against them. Feelings that there is no one in the system to ensure fairness for them and their families. Let me be clear. I was elected to, and I will continue to fight for you. There is nothing that will stop me from providing every person with a fair and impartial process. The resistors to change will not stop me. The critics will not stop me. And most certainly, this verdict will not stop me.
We just getting started about this lady. She does not just talk the talk, but man, don't she walk the walk. Stay tuned for part 2, because it's about to go down.